We can't undo the past, but we can be informed by it.
Yes, I see that.
I see trees of green, red roses too. I see them bloom for me and for you. And I think to myself, what a wonderful world.
Hello, everyone. My name is Ber-Henda Williams, and I like to do things by naming one, my family of origin, and also the land that I occupy. So I am Ber-Henda Williams. I'm from Detroit, Michigan. This is Anishinaabe territory. So if you're not familiar with what I mean by Anishinaabe are the indigenous people of the lands on which I currently reside. I am a daughter. I am a sister. I am a great niece. My family originated from Alabama, Arkansas, and North Carolina. So today it's such an honor to be here because I'm living out the legacy of my family. And I hope that I am making them proud today by sharing the history of Juneteenth because it is American history. And each of us are living, breathing members of this society. And society is made stronger when we work together.
My name is Joe Creekhouse. That's a German name. And I'm a mother of two, grandmother of one. And I live in Joplin, Missouri, in the Wildwood Senior Living facility, which I love living here. And we keep very busy. And I taught school for 27 years. And then I supervised student teachers for 11 years for the university here, which was a nice break from classroom duty, actually. No playground duty.
We're always educating, we're always teaching,
Right.
we're forever students. So it's such an honor to have a teacher interviewing me today. And I love that you also named that your name is German. My name, first name, is German as well. It means bare-hearted protector. So
Oh,
thank you.
good.
Yeah. So we're already starting out with such great connections.
My name means house on the creek.
Very nice.
But I'm very anxious to hear about Juneteenth because until just recently, I didn't know anything about it. So I'm open to all that you can tell me.
Yeah, the Juneteenth. Well, we'll just go ahead and kind of give a high level overview. We'll get into it. So, the Emancipation Proclamation was issued by Abraham Lincoln on September 22nd, 1862, and it went into effect on January 1st, 1863. However, um, enslaved Africans were not set free from the Confederacy until um, really 1865 when the Union Army arrived in Galveston, Texas. So the next day, June 19th, this is the day in which we acknowledge Juneteenth. General Gordon Granger announced that the those who were enslaved in Texas were free by order of the President of the United States. And so those who were enslaved in Galveston celebrated that day and were set free. And this became the first Juneteenth celebration that took place from the very next year on. So, as you see, it has taken quite a few years, decades even, for us to um, hear about this auspicious day. And it's now I would say within the last 10 years, it's moved around um, more up north. But this is a day that has been celebrated in Texas since the 1980s. And many other states, yes, have now officially recognized it as a holiday.
Why do you think it took from 1863 to 1865 to get to Texas so that they could be no longer a slave.
Well, sadly, in our country, this is the way in which our country was built. And the human beings who were sacrificed to forward move our economy, um, that's some divestment that people didn't want to give up. And so it took the abolitionists, and it took freed slaves, and it took the declaration of the president to help us to see the humanity in all people and relinquish really a blemish and a darkness in our American history. And so it takes a while for people to change their minds and change their hearts.
Yes, I see that. How do the people celebrate Juneteenth in your area?
Wow. So many things happen. There are parades and marches and barbecues, and there are ceremonies and public events, prayer, public service awards. There's a Juneteenth flag. In my area specifically, we have members of Congress who speak and make proclamations and declarations. We have festivities for children. Some reenactments occur as well. So I think that it definitely varies from community to community, but I am happy to say that in my community specifically, there are all kinds of events that are happening, both virtual and in person, social distancing, of course,
Of course.
of course, but there are at every level, and I think this is what makes it so important and impactful, that all the way to Congress, right down to the community member, the youngest to the oldest, are invited into recognizing this day and to, I believe and I hope, to create a pathway of inclusivity and recognizing that freedom is a birthright for all of us. Yeah.
I don't know of any celebrations that will be held here, so I wonder how widespread these celebrations are across the United States.
It's taken a while for this history to become more publicly known. And as I would say within the last 10 years, it has really been gaining more and more momentum, especially up north, because the origins obviously happen in the South. And that's a sordid history. That's a whole other history lesson
Right.
about. But I would say that um, each year celebrations are popping up everywhere, which is wonderful. So that means we get to have more open dialogues and conversations um, about this history, about segregation, and about the importance, I believe, for us to live out the edict of America. This is the land of the free. And none of us are free until all of us are free. And I think in order for us to really move forward, Juneteenth has got to be part of our classroom conversations, our family conversations, our community conversations. And I hope that this can serve as an opportunity, again, for us to, again, witness, yes, a darker part of our history, but also reach to the light part of our future. How can we heal together, though our works will look different? How can we work toward being in a nation that all of us can be proud to say that we belong to?
Right. So I'm sure you're involved a lot in planning this celebration in your area, right?
So I am supporting events in my area. So I run a girls leadership program, as a matter of fact, for young girls between the ages of 8 and 18. And I'm supporting one of our board members who is organizing a festivity this coming Saturday, where she'll have storytellers, she has historians coming, um, she has games, so cakewalks, and things of that nature. But it's really a day, again, yes, it's a day of recognition and celebration, but I definitely don't want it to divert away from the seriousness of it, to make sure that this history and this knowledge is passed on, because we know if we don't pay attention to history, we're doomed to repeat it. So it's
True.
nice, yeah. So I'm really excited too that even though I probably look very young, that the younger folks are taking the baton and doing things to commemorate this day.
Well, are there books? You said storytelling. Are there books written about this?
Oh, yeah. So there are books, but when I say storytelling, I'm so glad you asked for that clarification. So storytelling um, in the African American tradition, oh my goodness, goes back
Right.
even back to Africa, where the storytellers were the ones that captured the history. So these were like the news anchors of,
Right.
of the day. So they kept the oral history, because a lot of our history, unfortunately, has not been captured in books. So it's literally, storytelling is such a powerful and intimate gift that's usually passed from an elder to a younger person. And so the way the story and origins of uh, whether it be the folk tales, mythology, um, family history, it's all done orally. So then it's given to the next generation and they tell the story. And so events like this is where that oral history gets passed down. So that's where the storytellers come into place. So I will be providing you all with a PDF or a like an ebook of
Okay.
resources that will be shared with the community on books and videos that will help even give more context and light to the history of this day.
Okay. Well, that sounds exciting. I wish there was something going on here in Joplin that we could celebrate. Do they have anything about this in our history books?
No, sadly, there's not anything that has been written in the history books. Again, this is a little known, well, this historically has been little known. Again, when we think about the dates that I had given you, as we know, the principal economy of America was predicated on
Slaves.
slaves, enslaved African. And actually, we want to make sure that we say enslaved, because um, the nature of us as humans, we're free. And so the system enslaved people. And America, cotton, tobacco, in Latin America, sugarcane, these were what the big drivers of the economy of the day. And sadly, that economy was upheld by keeping people enslaved.
So if you were telling this story, you would start in the United States with how it occurred here rather than going clear back to Africa.
I think that I love that you asked that question. I would say that if we're going to really tell the story, we would have to go back to Africa. And the reason why I say we would have to go back to Africa is that there is an identity of African Americans that even many African Americans don't know. Africa had several kingdoms that were rich in um, diamonds and gold and coal and knowledge. For example, Timbuktu had one of the oldest libraries in the world. And when Europe was in the Dark Ages, many people traveled to Africa to get knowledge, to get things like arithmetic and physics. A lot of knowledge came out of the continent of Africa. So I think it's super important to name that too.
Well, now one of the questions that I heard, as a white person, how should I participate in Juneteenth? Teeth. How do you pronounce it?
Juneteenth. You got it right. Beautiful. So as a white person, I think that it's super important to do some more research on the event and share it with your friends and family. And I know that these conversations can be really tough. They can even be somewhat embarrassing. But here's the beauty that can come from this. We having these conversations, and you as a white person participating and sharing it, I believe that, especially for you, it comes natural. You're a teacher. This is history. And it's so important that we have conversations, share the knowledge that we know, and especially for our young people. So, as grandparents, as aunts and uncles, it's super important that we share with our children um, the truth, and then become what many refer to as allies.
I'd like to ask you, are the effects of slavery still seen in America today?
Yes, sadly, they are. So when we think about um, slavery, I think we think only the physical shackles, and that physically it's over. But there's things that happen to a person's um, spirit and their self-efficacy and what they can believe is possible for their lives. And when you, because of slavery, it hampered. Um, well, it was actually lethal to read. It was illegal for enslaved Africans to be able to read and write. It was illegal, and the penalty could be death for them to practice their own indigenous spirituality. Everything that your movement was restricted and governed. And so when we look at certain neighborhoods, the educational systems, access to very basic resources. Um, just recently, there was an acknowledgement of the Tulsa massacre. And
Oh,
Tulsa,
yes.
yes. And so Tulsa, Oklahoma was a place where many African Americans went to start a new life, and it became a very thriving community. And not just Tulsa, but Rosewood, and even here in Detroit, there were principally African American communities that were thriving that unfortunately were massacred and set on fire. So yes, we are still seeing the fallout of slavery. However, it's my hope that we can continue to have conversations like the one that you and I are having, that we can continue to build bridges, and when we see injustices occurring, that we have a holy boldness to speak up when we see um, injustices and share our resources, because each of us in building the beloved community, this is something that Dr. King spoke so much of. Yeah, growing a beloved community is that we take care of each other and share our resources and become champions of justice.
That terrible thing in Tulsa, I hadn't heard about it till just the last couple of years. And I just don't understand how people could have stood by and let that happen to all those people. What happened to humanity?
Such a beautiful question. And yes, place to ponder, how can people idly stand by? But if we don't acknowledge certain people as human, the way in which slaves were actually slaves were archived in much the same way livestock. That's the way that they were written down in books with a price associated with them, families ripped apart. So if you don't see another person as a human being, you're not outraged at the treatment. But I think that you said something really important. How can you stand by? There has to be something that knocks at our humanity for us to um, see an injustice and see harm being done.
I just can't understand how that happened, but it did.
It
And
did.
it's just now coming to light as far as my knowledge of it.
Hmm.
What was that, 100 years ago?
That's right. There was a 100-year anniversary, and I think that goes back to what we were talking about education. If these things aren't recorded and it becomes a revised history omitting these things, the truth is, as we see, always has a way of coming to light. We can bury something, but oh, that thing will always come to light. So I'm really grateful, for this opportunity and this conversation. And I hope that we do have more conversations about Tulsa and, like I said, Rosewood, because there were other massacres that occurred, and even the residential schools of our Indigenous brothers and sisters, where they suffered great atrocities. And if you're not familiar with what the Indigenous residential schools were, um, Indigenous children were taken from their families and put in these schools to have their identities, their Native American, Indigenous identities washed away. So taking it right out, they couldn't speak the language. They were not allowed to practice their religion. They were taken away from their families. They were given white names. And the last school didn't close until 1996.
Now, where did you say this was happening?
So this was happening all across the country, but specifically, I think it got eclipsed. So this came out at the same time as the Tulsa massacre anniversary. This was out of British Columbia, Canada.
Oh, really?
Yes, but residential schools weren't just there. But this is also a part of our American history, is the way in which we have treated the indigenous, those who were First Nations on this land, have also suffered immensely.
Yes, they have. It's sad, our history. You just wonder how people put up with that.
Yeah.
Do you think racial equality and harmony is possible in the United States today?
Whew.
That was a tough one.
That's a tough one. I want to say that we have to believe in the impossible,
That's as far as
because no, I'll elaborate a little bit more on that. We have to believe in the impossible, because look at you and I having this conversation, because there was
right.
a point in this history where, one, we didn't even have the technology to make this conversation
Right.
available. So that's one. And then two, because of our backgrounds, it would be one, life threatening for both of us to be in a conversation like this, because the things that we're talking about could have had very real repercussions for both of us, because we're talking about challenging a system that has been put in place to keep people separate and to use fear and violence to uphold that system. So we are having, for our ancestors, an impossible conversation. So that's what I mean when I say we have to believe in the impossible.
Do you think the last couple of years things have improved or gone downhill as far as treating people nicely?
I will say that there has been an exposure to the reality of race in this country. I think that things are so out in the open now that certain people, and I'll be very honest, white people are now seeing in a way that maybe they hadn't been able to see the treatment of people of color. And now we're having I would say, centuries long wait conversation. We're having that conversation now.
Well, we need to. Uh, it's worrisome, at my age. I can't do anything about it necessarily, but I have hopes for the future.
Mm-hmm.
I hope, anyway.
Well, you are doing something. The fact that you and I are here having this conversation right now, that's your beautiful contribution to making the world better.
Well, tell me more about what you're doing. You said you work with some girls.
I do.
What's that about?
Yeah, so I run a girls leadership program. And again, that's an impossible conversation because there was a time where women were only seen and not heard, and we were
Right.
only here to procreate, and that's it. But I work with girls in to get them into careers that we don't typically see women in. I have girls that have dreams of being engineers and doing mathematics and chemistry and the sciences. And we know that, especially when we look at Hidden Figures, the African American women who worked for NASA.
I love that movie.
Isn't that a great movie? And we can even go, going back further, was it Marie Curie? We know that women have brilliant minds, but in order to get women cultivated with their brilliance, we have to start when they're girls. So exposure is super important. And the hope is to instill in them that they can do anything that they put their minds to, and that they have a community behind them to support them.
And they have to have the, encouragement and the motivation to go on with your program.
That's right.
I'm sure that most of them do, wouldn't you say?
Yes, they do. They just want the opportunity. In fact, I'm so proud. We have a magazine coming out, and so one of our girls who was with us, we met her when she was a junior in high school, and this young lady now is a college graduate,
Good.
first in her family. She has been able to secure full-time employment. She's also an artist and she's an activist. And so we, took her in, like I said, when she was in high school, and to see her now as a fully functioning adult, college educated, really surpasses all of my wildest dreams. And she's now helping the next generation of girls. So it really does my heart, such a service, and really does the heart such good when you can see the impact that a program can have. And we're not funded with millions of dollars, but I think that in most cases it's not about the money, it's about the willingness.
And motivation.
That's right.
Got to have that.
That's right. Teacher, you've got to have the motivation.
I know that.
Mm-hmm.
When parents would come in and say, what can I do to help my child be a better student? That's a hard one. It's always, I'd say, well, read to them a lot, get them to read books and get involved with that. And the parents sometimes would say, well, I never like to read myself. The conversation there.
But that's super important to note too, because children are so observant. And I know you know this, it's not what we say, but what we do. So
Right.
when they see that what we say and what we do don't line up,
no,
that definitely informs what they value.
A very discouraging reply when the parents said that. And I thought, well, do what you can.
That's right.
To keep them reading in school.
Passion. When you find out what they're passionate about, that's kind of like the carrot.
Right.
So, just finding out what they enjoy and speak to that.
Well, do you have anything else you'd like to tell me or whoever about Juneteenth? I keep having trouble saying that.
It's a mouthful, Juneteenth. So it is a bit of a mouthful to say that, but I would. So final thoughts about Juneteenth, I would say is continue to educate yourself, and I'm going to be very candid. Sit in the discomfort with this, because I know, depending on whatever our backgrounds are, our family histories, this can be very difficult to accept, and it can also be very embarrassing to think of ways in which, depending on what side of history you were on, you know you might have lineage that was on the side of the Confederacy, and then that's just a reality. But what I would invite is, in we get to decide where we go,
Right.
where our families go, because we can't undo the past, but we can be informed by it. So I would say with Juneteenth, take this as an opportunity to educate yourself, and then look at ways in your community. I don't know that they can all be rock star correspondents like you, but figure out your way to make a contribution. And I believe that it's never too late. We're all here to love and to contribute to each other, because we're a community. We are, again, the impossible conversation made possible.
You're a good advocate for the Juneteenth. I, I've really enjoyed this conversation, and
Me too.
so helpful to me. And I applaud you for your school, the girls thing that you're doing with them. That's remarkable.
Yeah. Well, this was my pleasure. I'm glad we got to know each other.
Okay. I'll come up there and you come down here.
Sounds like a date. We'll make that happen.
Okay.
Okay.
And I think to myself, what a wonderful